Hey guys, what's happening? So for this one, we're getting into Aliens versus Avengers, written by Jonathan Hickman. And there's a lot of messed up stuff that happens in this first issue. I love it. But also I got a theory about how this may have started, and I'll mention that as we make our way through. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so starting this out, we're shown a sequence of archaeological images that look just like the ones out of the Prometheus movie, which represented large beings being worshipped, with a configuration of stars or moons stacked on top of each other led to the location of the architects who created life as we know it. But in this case, we're shown that this configuration matches that of what is a laboratory, located just above a black hole. But when we head inside, we find a Kree soldier being experimented on, though in his case, the experiment was deemed a failure. And all we're told here is that the host failed post-implantation. But with us seeing the blood around his mouth and the Xenomorph facehugger, it's pretty clear what type of experimentation is going on here. But we learn more when we see that this experiment's being held by what appears to be a couple of Shi'ar scientists, though that's not exactly the case. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we find out through their conversation that 4 out of 5 of their experiments were successful, with 2 of those species being Kotati and Skrull, which right there sounds like a hint for what type of Xenomorphs we may see down the line. But in the here and now, as far as their experimentations, their plans to produce Skrull Xenomorphs is next to impossible, since the Skrulls don't have a homeworld to seed, and the few that remain fall outside of their mission parameters. But in the middle of their discussion, they find themselves under attack by a group of 4 Wakandan ships that quickly destroy their defense battery just before blasting the door open and making their way in. And when they do, among them we find King T'Challa and his son, Prince Azari. And as they enter, T'Challa goes on to say, "The black hole below us is massive enough to cause a severe time dilation. Hours here cost us years out there. A high cost, but nothing compared to the one being paid on T'Chaka's reach. We quarantined an entire sovereign Wakandan world because of the weapon we traced back to this place." But it isn't long after they arrive where they detect a small group of Xenomorphs incoming. So T'Challa just looks at his son and he says, "Azari." And right there, Azari already knows what he needs to do. And you can tell with how this is done that it ain't their first time either. So Azari steps forward and he hits these Xenomorphs with lightning. You know, with him being the son of both T'Challa and Storm. But even still, it's sick how this is done, because he just handles these things like it's light work. But while Azari's handling this, the other soldiers of the Hatut Zeraze, they're instructed by T'Challa to go find the masters of this place and bring them before him. But when they do, they only bring back one, who was trying to purge their systems when the soldiers reached the command deck. And though he did discard most of it, they were able to retrieve some of the data. But they also found out that the same weapon that was used on the Intergalactic Empire, others have been launched to at least a dozen more locations. So one of his men are like, those worlds need to be secured. No one can be allowed to leave, and everyone who has left must be traced and those worlds quarantined as well. We cannot let this spread. So T'Challa tells his men, under normal circumstances, that would be true. But because of the time debt they've incurred by being next to this huge black hole, it's not likely that they'll succeed. And to take things up another notch, one of his men also goes on to tell him there's more, because one of those target worlds was Earth. So next, T'Challa just looks at this guy and he's like, "What kind of monster are you?" And it's here where he reveals that this guy is not Shi'ar, as it would appear. He's not living at all. He's a machine. And this guy just kind of scoffs at him. He's like, "A machine? If you prick me, do I not bleed?" So next, T'Challa's more or less like, "Hey, I'm on a tight schedule." So he cuts this dude's head clean off, and they take it with them to see if they can get more information out of it. And following this, after they leave, we get this conversation between father and son, where at first Azari's like, "Well, what do we do now?" And T'Challa's response is pretty crazy, because he tells his son how he spent a lifetime building an empire to pass on to him. But now that the monsters are over the walls, the gates are flung open, and their great city has fallen, now their singular goal is the oldest one known to mankind, and that goal is survival. And following this, we're given this insane montage that shows us how the world fell. And it explains the process along the way, because it goes on to say, seed worlds were not chosen at random, but once a world is chosen for the host, the process, regardless of which world it is, remains the same. Each seed probe carries 4 queen eggs inside of it, along with 12 infected hosts. in suspended animation, and then 4 locations in proximity of high-density population centers are targeted for initial infestation. Placed into suspended animation on the precipice of a life cycle transition, it takes almost no time for a host to yield their hidden bounty, a Xenomorph, the greatest killing machine in the history of the universe. Within an hour, these alien drones born from the chest bursters are fully grown, and within a day, a hive has been constructed so that the life cycle of an alien queen can begin. Days later, that queen is born and begins producing eggs. From there, the process accelerates. Within 1 week, each individual hive will produce a brigade of warrior drones. Within 1 month, an endless army. Within 1 year, a planet-raising horde. And remember, each seed probe contains 4 such queens. It is the perfect delivery mechanism for the extinction of a species, of every living thing on Earth, regardless of if they are baseline humans or something greater. Which right there just tells you, with 4 queens arriving from the start, those 4 are starting at the queen phase, as the other 12 infected hosts are producing drones that'll make more hives and create more queens. So in the larger picture, their numbers are growing insanely fast, because you have multiple groups who are many steps ahead. And on top of that, we're told the Inhumans could have avoided the invasion, but because of their internal rifts between one another, this allowed the Xenomorphs to make their way in. And in the case of Atlantis, no one heard a peep, because you can't hear people scream from underwater. And speaking of water, when we head over to Krakoa, we're told when it became clear that extinction was at hand, the mutants of Krakoa decided to abandon their island home and use their gateways to flee to Mars. The mutants ran for the safety of the Red Father, all of them, except for one. Apocalypse, the first mutant, would stay and surrender nothing, for the world had now become the arena he always wanted. Apocalypse will fight, and if he lives, he lives. If he dies, he dies. And I gotta say, I'd love to see this in live action. Like, I would buy a ticket to watch 3 hours of this. But I also gotta say, if one of the face huggers gets lucky and gets a hold of Apocalypse, man, you might as well just throw the whole Earth away, bro. And I mean, at this point, it doesn't look like there's much left to save. But even still, there's a few people on this planet. Like, if Xenomorphs bust out of their chests, it's gonna be a problem. Like, imagine the president making an announcement and saying something like, "My fellow Americans, I ain't gonna lie, we getting cooked." But following this, we're told this situation spread all over the world, all except the last human city, a stronghold in the ruins of America. No one knows how, but they were ready for what was coming. Like a prophet of doom, the old man of Wayland knew, and he built a city that would withstand the end of the world. So really quick, I want to mention here, and I'm not sure if this is going to be significant anywhere down the line, but I believe this is a version of the billionaire Peter Wayland, the CEO and founder of Wayland Corp. from the Prometheus film, the same guy who created the lifelike android David, the same guy who approved and funded the exploration to the location that matched the cave paintings from around the world, which were said to be an invitation from the architects who created mankind. And I mean, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Prometheus or Alien Covenant, but in Prometheus, David went crazy. He found some black alien goo and started using it to experiment on a crew member, and he eventually went to the architect's home world and wiped them out with it. And I mean, the Peter Wayland in the films, he snuck aboard the ship because he wanted to ask his creators about the secrets to creation and get them to extend his life or something like that. But when they found the architect, he ripped David's head off and killed Peter right after. But David got his head back later, and that's when he went on to do more experimentations. Either way, I digress. But I bring this up because this has me thinking, if this is a version of that Peter Wayland, the billionaire who funded and approved that launch, I imagine in this case he didn't sneak aboard the ship. He just communicated with his version of David, who he probably designed to look like they were from the Shi'ar. But over time, he realized that his David was crazy, like the one in the movie, and he was going to send back some Xenomorphs to wipe everyone out. But again, not sure if that's the case, I just had to share my thoughts. But all we're told here is that this Wayland guy knew, which implies that he's keeping some kind of dark secret, because he knew long enough to build what would be the last city standing on Earth. But nonetheless, when we get here, we find the much older Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers, and at this point, Bruce has got gamma-powered cataracts, so he's pretty much blind. But it's here in their conversation where we find out more about what happened to the other heroes in this world. Because it's here where Bruce says it was bad when Johnny and Susan died in the accident. Reed got worse, Franklin and Ben disappeared to who knows where. never to be seen again. And as far as Reed, he was convinced the universe he had bent to the shape of his life was conspiring to take away the only thing he really cared about. He was the smartest man I ever met, an unyielding, towering force for good. But by the end, entropy had won its war, and he was a shell of what he used to be. On his deathbed, Reed Richards made me promise. He made me give my word that I would protect his only living daughter. And now Valeria's out there, about to make me a liar because she had a plan to save us all. And I believed her. And right in the middle of their talk, Carol gets an incoming message who tells her that she has contact on the perimeter. So right away, Bruce is like, is that her? So Carol tells him it's her, but she's coming in hot through the ruins. Enemies are everywhere. And as soon as Bruce heard that it was her, as soon as he knew that it was Valeria, this man hulked out and jumped out of the city off a drop step. Meanwhile, patrolling the perimeter, Miles Morales is already out there. And I mean, what's a post-apocalyptic world without Miles Morales? But after this, Miles is able to snatch up Valeria just before this Xenomorph is able to get its hands on her. Like, whew, that was close. And together, Bruce and Miles, they handle this Xenomorph and they get Valeria out of there. And when they do, we find out that she made it back with an egg. And later on, when they return to Wayland Tower, she lets Carol, Miles, and Bruce know that this is it. Because if there's any chance of them winning, if there's any hope at all, this is how they do it. So Valeria goes on to explain what she means by this, starting out by letting them know they were going about this all wrong. Because prior to this, they were trying to stop the Xenomorphs at the implantation stage, which made sense at the time because they were trying to save the people who were being used as hosts. But what they didn't realize before was that as soon as one of them attached to someone, that person was already dead. And they tried everything before, whether it was science or magic, but none of it worked. So now, the only thing left that they can do is start sooner. And that's where Valeria's solution lies, because she's going to create a virus that will kill the eggs. And I'm gonna tell you right now, when Valeria was explaining this, I was getting a little worried because I thought we were heading in the direction of Xenomorph birth control, and I'm glad it didn't go there. But either way, when she explains this, right away, Miles is like, can you actually do that? As far as killing the eggs, is that possible? And Valeria just gives him this look like, of course I can, before telling him yes. But for a brief moment here, Bruce, he's hesitant about the idea. Because he's like, what if that virus mutates into something even worse than what they're dealing with now? But Carol tells him, like, Bruce, there is no worse. So he asks Valeria, she's sure about this. So she tells him, I can do it. I just need time. Now, if you all don't mind, could you please leave so I can get to work? And after this, when she gets started, we head over to a conversation between Bruce and Mr. Wayland, where he tells Bruce that Valeria is brilliant, just like her father. And perhaps she will perform a miracle here, just like Reed did so many times in the past. But for Bruce, he believes that that's just a lot of weight to put on someone's shoulders. So Mr. Wayland responds saying, what Valeria's doing here, this is going to determine their next move, because this city is only going to stand for so long. And because of that, the day's coming where they're going to have to make the hard decision of whether they're going to stay here and fight or save what's left of humanity and run for their lives. And Bruce even ends up telling him here that he thought Valeria wasn't even going to make it back. And if she didn't, Bruce would have blamed him for convincing Bruce to let her go. And he even makes sure to tell him, like, do you understand? I would have been angry at you. But Mr. Wayland's like, hey, she made it back, didn't she? And he goes on to tell Bruce, you believe everyone is weak, but we are all made of sterner stuff than you think. It's not our skin, the outer shell, that defines a person. It's what's inside that counts. And so later on, Bruce makes his way to the lab to check on Valeria and bring her something to eat, but the door doesn't open. So he's yelling from outside like, you gotta eat something. The mind is powered by the body, you have to keep your strength up. So next he goes for the override, only to have it followed up by a video message from Valeria with her telling him, hey Uncle Bruce, if you're seeing this recording, I'm sorry, but you can't come in. I wanted to defeat them once and for all, but I ran out of time. My plan worked. Well, it was working. I used a light bender based on my mom's powers, and I walked right into the hive. I isolated and grabbed an egg slowly. I started backing out. It worked, Bruce. I would have succeeded, gotten away, but then I tripped over something, and they were all over me. I remember choking in darkness and then waking up knowing something was inside of me, which right there just lets you know she got a xenomorph inside of her. And she ran out of time prior to this. And the next thing we see is the Hulk just punch his way through. And as soon as he does, this xenomorph just jumps right on top of him. And it looks full grown, so Valeria, she's been dead for at least an hour. And if you ever wondered what would happen in a fight between the Hulk and the Xenomorph, you finna get your answer. Cause when this thing gets up in the Hulk's face, it tries to bite him with the mouth inside of the mouth like he's Sigourney Weaver, only for the Hulk to just rip this thing's head off, which then gets the Xenomorph acid blood all over him. But any damage that's done just instantly goes away, cause it's the Hulk. So I imagine for him, this is like the equivalent of having shampoo get in your eye or something. And after handling the Xenomorph, he picks up Valeria's body and carries her outside the lab. So everybody comes after hearing the alarm go off. But they don't really get a chance to mourn Valeria here, because now they know they got a face hugger on the loose. And without warning, this thing jumps out of the shadows and it lands on Miles Morales. And I gotta tell you, man, when I first saw this, I had to put the iPad down. I had to take a walk. I was heated, man. And it's crazy because once this thing gets a hold of Miles, Carol's like, we gotta get it off of him. But Bruce is just like, we went over this already. It can't be done. I've seen it tried 1,000,000 times now. There's no mind to control. The nervous system is autonomous. Any attempted removal kills the host every single time. So Carol's like, well, we gotta do something. And Mr. Wayland says, yes, we do. Soon an enemy will be growing inside him. And when it emerges, it will only want one thing, to kill every one of us. We don't have a choice. Burn it. So for a moment, Carol's about to say, I'm sorry, Miles. I wish there was some other way. But then you see this look of shock on her face, and we find out Miles had been wearing the Venom symbiote this whole time. And the symbiote goes from Miles onto this creature, and it says, we don't like this body, but it'll do for now. And it's crazy because it's like, man, this confirms it. Symbiote trumps Xenomorph. So next, Carol, she helps Miles up and she asks him like, hey, you okay? And Miles like, hell nah, what you think? Like, this man thought it was over. But the symbiote chimes in for him, telling everyone else, yes, we are fine, as it jumps back onto Miles. And I mean, right there, I would have fainted. Like, how you gonna jump back on me with that thing? Like, right after what just happened. But again, the symbiote lets everyone know we're good. But right after that, Miles is like, speak for yourself. Because there's only one thing that's gonna make me be able to sleep at night. We've got to get the hell off this planet. Which right there just means they're gonna have to go with Mr. Wayland's plan B. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.